in the chat. So I invite you again today to just say where nation, vocation ministry, and also education at the higher education level, looking at spirituality. He would have a real expertise in this area. And we thought, as we're looking with the church on the gifts that the spiritualities offer and religious life within it, and all those who are part of different spiritual families, it would be great to just know a little bit more about the Augustinian charism and how someone who has that spirit, that charism, might look at decision making, decision taking, and the whole process of discernment. In religious life, over the centuries, there are a number of congregations who would say, yes, we have an Augustinian rule that is part of our spirit, that is part of our story. And I was just really moved yesterday when our brother Kevin said, the OSA, his congregation, that actually is a convergence of other groupings as well. And so in religious life, as we're recognizing that sometimes areas merge or provinces converge and become something new. Gianluca, can you make sure that no one else can do the screen share, please? That as we're doing this, that we can actually see the evolution both of religious life and even charisms. Because a charism is dynamic. It doesn't stay the same. What it was 100 years ago has continually moved. Every new member that has the charism brings something to the congregation. And when someone dies and is part of the communion of saints, that spirit continues too. So there's just a beauty as religious life is realizing our connection with everyone. And so how the spirit has never been at a loss for creativity, so has never limited the world and here the church to one or two or a few charisms, but even there has said, what is the charism today? You may still say the same, it's this, but what is it looking like? What is it feeling like? What does it sound like in the different places in the world? And so that's both the continuity and the dynamism. And so we had day one, and you really got a lot of material from Kevin. And today, I said yesterday, there's a different feel and flow to some of the material, and he's bringing us more deeply also into the spirituality in this, and is going to continue to say to us, well, these are some examples of how Augustinians discern. Here's how we have looked at things, and tried to discern on different areas. And of course, all of this is helpful for all of us because we realize that we have a Pope now, Pope Leo, who is Augustinian. And so just as Pope Francis was impacted by his Ignatian background, certainly Leo is impacted and therefore impacts us with the beautiful gift of the Augustinian charism. So I don't know if you have any more stories to go with Pope Leo that you want to share, but we're certainly happy to have you, Kevin, as now a member of your general council, and as someone with a rich background to give us a little more, feed us a bit more in this Easter season with the life that is Augustinian. So you are most welcome.
All right. Well, thank you, Maria, and thank you, everybody. Once again, it's great to be with you. And it's so great to see so many people Are people going to return? What if they didn't like what I had to offer? So it's good that to have people come back, and for us, as Maria said, to go deeper together today. And I think that really will be the theme. But before we do that, I do have another Leo story from a couple weeks ago, actually. One of the friars with whom I worked at Villanova came over to visit. He was having a family reunion over here. There were 28 of them, and it was his generation, the next generation, and then the generation below that. Friar happened to minister with Leo in Peru for about 20 years. And he also served on the council when Leo was our prior general. So they have a really wonderful fraternal bond and friendship. So he had asked Leo if he would have a private audience with his family, and he said, "Oh, absolutely." So on the day of the audience, it was actually Palm Sunday. He Art This friar grabbed me and said, "Would you like to come to the audience with us?" I said, "Oh gosh, it's for your family." He goes, "No, but your family too. So come on over." And we're thinking we're going to get like 20, 30 minutes tops. I mean, how long do you get with the Pope, with all of, that he has to do? And it was Palm Sunday, the beginning of Holy Week. So we go through the whole process to get in to the Clementine Hall, and we're not even in there 10 seconds. And Leo just comes in by himself with a photographer. He arranged to have a Vatican photographer for this friar and his family. And, he does the embrace of everybody. Everyone gets the official picture. He blesses all the religious articles. It was really just very touching and moving. And at one point, about 20 minutes in, he said, "So, do you want to see anything?" And we all just like went, What?" He goes, "Well, you know, I can unlock the Sistine Chapel if you want." And we're like, Sure, let's go to the Sistine Chapel. So he brought us into the Sistine Chapel, showed us where he sat. And incidentally, I didn't know this because I've never been in a conclave and I don't plan on ever being in a conclave, but they level out the floor for the conclave so that no one trips on the stairs that go into the sanctuary. But he showed us where he sat when everything was happening, and then he brought us into the Pauline Chapel where he prayed after, he was elected, and brought us into this great hall to show us, the doors that go out into the loggia. And we said, one of the younger kids said, "Can you open the doors out into the square?" He goes, "No, no, no. If I do that, people will freak out because I don't come out to that loggia too often." So it was just a really wonderful moment with him. And I also think wonderful for him because he does really rejoice in relationships, right? And I think it was just as important to him to meet with this brother of ours who ministered with him and is a dear, dear friend. So I think it helped him. But he ended up spending over an hour and a half with us on Palm Sunday. And I thought, good Lord, don't you have something better to do? But actually, I think that was what he wanted to do, and he felt called to do it. So really very endearing, very normal. Before we get into today, I want to just put in the chat two bibliographic sources that I was talking about that are just recently published. The first is from Joe Kelly, and this really just came out a couple weeks ago from New City Press, and it's called A Primer on Augustinian Spirituality, Communion, Participation, and Mission. And it's using the lens of synodality, actually. I haven't had a chance to read it in full, but it's he'll be very good. And there's other things that he has written that are on that page as well. He's a very good, he makes Augustine very accessible. The other one is from this friar that worked with Leo both in Peru and on the council, Art Picaro. He's currently at Villanova University, and this is his most recent book. It's also available, and it's located in the link, and it's called Building a Better World, a Contemporary Augustinian Perspective. And he uses the rule of Augustine to open up ecological consciousness and awareness and issues around justice and peace. So I think you'll find them both very, very accessible. Um, so As we begin, I would just like us to just take a moment. I'd be curious if you want to just write in the chat what has stayed with you from yesterday. Maria shared with us what has stayed with her. A couple of the things like the unioning from the very beginning of our roots as Augustinian friars, how we came to be, and how we were a merged community. Is there anything else that perhaps touched your heart? Okay, and feel free just to write it in the chat. Yeah, wonderful. So we're seeing the link between obedience and synodality. Synodality is about obedience. Yeah, like really listening to the heart of God, right? And God's also in dialogue with us, listening to our hearts. The oneness of heart, the one heart, the mendicant contribution, building community intentionally. Great, wonderful. The one heart with creation. Yes. Stop, look, and listen. Wonderful. And how it's all Eucharistic. Yes. Common good and the individual needs. Yes. Yes. Thinking with the heart. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for all of that. So we're going to be taking those themes and start to weave them together to see how we can actually use this for communal discernment. That whole notion of being a corporate body and being a one body that we share a heart together, and how we can use it as a way to discern and hopefully make some decisions in terms of religious life, our approach to ministry, and responding to the emerging needs of the church and the world. One thing I just wanted to emphasize again is that mendicant contribution, which I think is really powerful. There's something about what the mendicants, when the mendicants kind of emerged, they really were responding to needs at the time, just as all of the communities, right? And there's something that links the four of us together, the four main groups, as well as the other mendicant communities, like the Servites, Mercedarians. Um, the Augustinians share a particular common heritage with Franciscans and Carmelites in that we all come from the hermit tradition. The Dominicans, we share the rule of Augustine. So they use the rule of Augustine at their profession. But Dominic and his first band of followers, a lot of them came from the canon movement. So any of the canon regular groups, that some of whom may be in this space right now. So I'm thinking, the Norbertines, for instance, they all follow the rule of Augustine. What ends up becoming distinctive about the Augustinians, and I use the word distinctive not to say better, because it's not that anybody's better, it's just particular and distinct. In the history, if you remember on May 8th, when Leo introduced himself to the world, he said, I am a son of Augustine. Now, if you remember in the history, Augustine did not found us. We consider him a spiritual founder, but we have no real historical link to the person of Augustine other than the spirituality and the rule. But what's interesting is in our history, and this is where we kind of had some fun in our early beginnings. So after we were founded, and after the church kind of gave its blessing, the church and the world were going through some difficult moments, and there was a lot that was going all over the Fourth Lateran Council had a lot to say about religious communities and new religious communities, and they were fearful that it was getting out of hand, and they wanted to put some controls. So they made this proclamation that after a particular date, Any community that was founded after that date would no longer be considered valid or licit to be able to go out and minister to the world. So the Carmelites and the Augustinians were in a quandary because we were technically founded after that date. Francis and Dominic had founded before the date. So what we did, and it shows how religious from the very beginning have been very creative. We started to rewrite our history. And to the point where we forgot that we rewrote the history. And it wasn't really until Vatican II that we went, oh, this is actually the truth of how we came into being. But we started coming up with stories, and actually pretty good ones, about how Augustine founded us. And that when he went up to Milan, where his conversion happened, he was baptized with his friends by Ambrose. He then went and found himself in the hills of Tuscany and founded those hermit communities. So that was basically what we started to say and believe about ourselves. The Carmelites did the same thing, and they linked themselves back to Elijah on Mount Carmel, to the point where they said that they actually lived with Elijah on Mount Carmel and then converted to Christianity after the death and resurrection of Jesus. They were very creative. They even have stories where Mary and Elizabeth played with Jesus and John the Baptist when they were little on Mount Carmel, right? So again, they were believing these stories just like us. But it was a very creative way to start to claim our roots, and that's really how we started to take on the person of Augustine, which then, about 100 years or so after our foundation, we were given the custody of his remains in the town of Pavia in the Lombard section of Italy. And that's a whole story about how his remains ended up there. But incidentally, Leo will be going to Pavia in June. So it's interesting, last week, he started his African travel by going to Annaba, which is present day Hippo, where bishop for all of those years. And that's how he started his journey. And he'll be going to Pavia where his remains are. So it's just an interesting little tidbit, I think, for people to take. So included in that, Maria, you had so thoughtfully talked about the various sub-families of the Augustinian family, that there are many institutes, congregations, communities that follow the rule of Augustine, right? And some of them are aggregated to the Augustinian order. I know that our sisters of the School Sisters of Notre Dame, who are present on the Zoom, they're part of the Augustinian family. The Assumptionists are also part of the family, including also the Religious of the Assumption and the Little Sisters of the Assumption. The Alexian brothers also consider themselves part. So it's very interesting and enriching to see how we all together are sisters and brothers to each other and have various expressions and understandings of this shared charism, and how we really enrich each other in this approach. So to get into today, I'm going to invite us to again listen with our ears on our heart, on each other's hearts, and also try to lean into the one heart of God that's calling all of us together and to oneness. And to do that, I'm going to play another video. If you ever get bored, at least I have some good videos to share. Let's see here. Enable content. And I want to make sure that I just want to make sure something. There we go. Make sure that the computer sound. Okay, great. Perfect. And let us begin. Oh. Now, this video that I'm going to be playing um, again, that are interacting with each other. This time it's a group of toddlers together, and they're going to be arguing about rain, whether it's sprinkling outside or if it's raining. So let's see what they have to share.
It's sprinkling. No, it's raining. No. Hey, yes, sprinkling. No, it's raining. No, it's sprinkling. No, it's raining. My mom told me it's sprinkling. It was raining. No. Yes, it is. My mom told me it was sprinkling, not raining. My mom said it is raining. No, my mom told me it was sprinkling. Because my mom didn't say it's raining. No, my mom said it's sprinkling. My mom said it's raining. Ow! My mom. You pull. My mommy said it's. Say sorry to the sprinkling. My mom told me it was sprinkling. It's not. It's not. Mommy. It's sprinkling outside, Macy. Mommy said raining. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, you're pretty. And you're not real. I'm real. Watch. We're going to go out there and see. I'm not going to see anymore. Watch is not going to see. Watch. We're going to go out there and watch. It was just raining. Because it's raining. No, it's not. It just rained. It just raining. Ow. It just raining. Little Clay. It's raining. You poked my heart. Little Clay. You poked my heart. Turn around and then I'm gonna get honey. And me and who can do that? Okay. Deal. You poked my heart. Turn around.
Hey. All right, I'm going to just stop sharing for a minute. And I would just to get your reactions to this video of sprinkling versus raining. So feel free to use the chat. What did you see? What did you notice? Mom is the ultimate authority. My mother would agree with that for sure. Um, but yes, that the mother or the two mothers become the sources of authority, and they're not even in the dialogue, but they become the source, right? Each one hopes that repeating things will help to prove their point, even if they kept saying the same thing over and over again. An argument on authority. Everyone sticking to their point and not moving, not budging. Seeing things from your own perspective. Argument between two people who are seeing the same reality in different points of views. An insistence on uniformity. Oh, good point. Yeah, one wanted to actually go and see because there's no proof that any of them have even been outside or if they're even near a window, but they're just basing it on what other people told them to be true. Some other things to note that let me see something here. Wait a minute. Um, a couple of things to note. So there's the argument going between the two, and there's what I would call the good twin and the evil twin. The good that's between the two others, and she serves as like a mediator between the two, right? She's the one that asks, "Are you okay?" Right? And we have these outside sources of authority. There's a couple other tactics that go on. At one point, the little boy uses this tactic where he says to the girl, "You're pretty," and she doesn't fall for it and still doesn't go to his side. So because of that, he cancels, right? And so we have all of these things that are kind of cute-ish for toddlers, but when you add 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it's no longer cute. And it might not even be funny anymore. It actually can get pretty violent. And I think in some ways is a nice commentary on the state of our world. Right? Again, it goes back to Pope Francis's insight about how we have forgotten how to dialogue, how we have forgotten how to listen to each other, how we have forgotten to know how to encounter and see each other from each other's points of views. Because when it comes down to it, whether it's sprinkling or raining, the truth is, if it's actually true, is that water is coming from the clouds, right? The others are just kind of semantics, right? What's interesting is, as it does kind of get a little bit more violent, there's some poking that gets involved, right? And at one point, the little girl touches the heart. She pokes the heart, and he goes, "Oh, you poked my heart." That actually, I believe, is an antidote to what's going on in our world. And even what's going on that's so divisive in our church at times. If we can get to a true poking of the heart, to start to see what is it that really pokes our hearts, right? In other words, what is perhaps our heartache? What are we aching for in our lives? What about the suffering that's going on, in our own lives, in our family lives, in our community lives, and even in the world? What needs healing, right? That word, heartache, there's another word that we could start to use, and it's passion. Passion is a word that, in its root, both in its Latin and its Greek etymology and its roots, means a suffering of sorts, right? So we can think of the passion of Christ. Traditionally we talk about the saving life, death, passion, and resurrection of Jesus, right? But we can also expand that and perhaps widen it and deepen it, that it's not simply about suffering, but it's the passion that Jesus brought into his ministry, the passion that Jesus brought into his mission. What's our passion? What gets us out of bed in the morning? What pokes our heart to the point where it hurts so much, that deep heartache that we have when you've done so much that it hurts? A love that hurts. It's interesting as I'm, again, learning and struggling to learn Italian. Our Italian teacher, there's six of us in the class. She's just a delightful person and a very effective teacher. And we're going over some, pronunciation exercises and all this sort of stuff. And I'm lacking a lot of confidence in my pronunciation and going into French pronunciations of things or what I think it might be Spanish and not getting all of the Italian out. So every now and then, Simona, our beloved teacher, will slam her hand down on the desk and say, "Forza, forza, con passione." And she says, the Italian language, the Italian culture is all about strength and is all about passion. She said, you have to exaggerate when you enunciate. She goes, you might sound ridiculous, but she goes, the more force and passion you put into it, the more you will embrace the culture and the culture will embrace you, right? So get in touch with our passions and how our charisms are our passions and get us out of bed in the morning to serve the Lord whom we love and to serve all of God's people, no matter where these people are. So, how do we bring passion into our life? There's another story I have, and it's the story of a brother of mine and myself. I was accompanying him on his annual eye exam. And he has really, really bad eyesight. So he always gets a little bit nervous when he goes for his eye exam. And he said to me, Kev, could you drive with me? It's going to be later afternoon. The sun will have set. And I just need somebody to drive me home because of all the stuff that they do with my pupils being dilated. And I said, sure, absolutely. So we go, and he actually has a very good eye exam, good results, and it's downpouring when we leave the optometrist. And the kind of rain, speaking of rain, it wasn't really just sprinkling, it was pouring down rain where you get more wet than you actually do in the shower, like that kind of rain. So we decided to get off the road and grab an early dinner. So we go into the restaurant, and he and I were just catching up on life together. We weren't in the same missions. And just talking about this, inevitably we get so into our conversation and filled with a lot of laments about community life, right? And about lack of decisions that we're making, or this particular issue in ministry that we're encountering, or this particular issue we might be encountering in our local community, et cetera, and so on. And the whole time, the server, the waitress, was trying to get our attention to say, would you like anything to drink? So she ended up just bringing glasses of water. And I said, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. She goes, oh yeah. She goes, I've just been trying to see if you wanted anything to drink. And I said, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. We just got really pulled into our conversation. And she goes, by the way, my name is Esperanza. Well, at that point, I said, of course it is. Esperanza, hope. Hope was trying to get our attention in the midst of our conversation. Hope was trying to enter into our dialogue in the midst of our laments, and as real as they were, in the midst of our complaints, in the midst of our heavy-heartedness. Hope was there the entire time. Is that not what is being offered in our synodal relationships and in our dialogue with each other? As difficult as discernment can be, as hard of a work as deeply listening to each other, to each other's truths, what's on each other's hearts, hope is always present. We just heard the road to Emmaus, right? Hope was present. Christ was present in the midst of all that was heavy in these two disciples, right? Hope is always there. And isn't that particularly what we as religious, women and men who are vowed, what we've committed our life to help point out, wake up the world to come to its senses and to see Esperanza always there, ready to serve us. I'll go back to sharing my screen. Augustine had something to say about this. We won't poke the heart again. Wait a minute. Yes, in his Confessions. With your word, you have pierced my heart, and I fell in love with you. This was Augustine reflecting on his tolle lege moment, his pick up and read moment, the moment in the Confessions where he lays down his life on the ground, literally, and answers the call. And reflecting further on his baptism, he says that all of his friends together, that their hearts had been pierced with God's charity. And we bore your words within us, like a sword penetrating us to the core. How is it that in our discernment together, our communal discernment, in our dialogue, in being synodal as we walk this journey together and stay together, how are we poking each other's hearts with hope, with Esperanza, who's always there, accompanying us on the way? That's the seal of the order of Augustine, of St. Augustine. And you can see that it's the word is piercing the heart and setting it on fire in service. How do our words with each other pierce our ears on each other's hearts? To pay attention to what makes each of us tick, what our heartaches are, and how we can serve one another in hope and in love. So all of this is building and pointing to a particular methodology, what I'm calling the Augustinian posture and disposition for synodality and communal discernment. And I'm basing it on, there's a wonderful scene in Book 9 of the Confessions that Augustine shares with his mother Monica shortly before she passes over to the Lord. And it's the vision at Ostia. Ostia is a port city in Rome, a beach town that people go and have vacation at. And there's actually the ancient Ostia that you can explore. The actual streets that Augustine and Monica and his wonderful friends would have walked on when they first entered Rome, and also when they were leaving, and where Monica herself had died. But they have a wonderful moment with each other where they're basically this is depicting that they're leaning on each other, and they have a moment where they're looking out on a window on a garden. Incidentally, a garden is very symbolic in Augustine's Confessions. It's where his conversion happens, and it's to hearken back to the Garden of Eden, where he himself is being recreated, right? But they have this moment, and it's one of wonderful intimacy between a mother and her son, who had yet loving relationship, right? Monica was always there, wanting the best for her son, and gave him, yet struggled with it, the freedom that he needed to make, but always was ready to kind of rein him in if need be. So they had a moment where they were talking together, reflecting on his baptism, his son's baptism, and all of his friends. And they had a wonderful moment, profound moment of reconciliation with each other in their dialogue. And Augustine says that at that moment, they fell silent together. And they just had this moment. He says, I don't know exactly how long this was, but we got to the same where it was as if we heard all of creation stop with us in silence and proclaim and praise, we were made. We're everything together, all of God's creation, acknowledged who God was, praised God, and acknowledged that themselves as shared creatures made by a loving God. It's this that gives us an Augustinian posture and disposition. And it touches on five different points that will start to explain and start to show how it looks in community life and discernment. The first is interiority, going within. Augustine became an expert of interiority. In many ways, his confessions is his opening up to us his interior journey, all of the workings of his heart and his mind. The next is self-knowledge, and how that becomes an important step into knowing who God is, right? And knowing who our neighbors are. The step after that is humility. He says in many of his writings that that is the most fundamental virtue. And then he says the second fundamental virtue is also humility. The third is humility. He keeps coming back to humility. I think probably because he may have struggled with it himself, right? He was a very talented person. People came to him for many, many things. And so he knew that this was a call from God to remain humble, to be grounded, literally to be grounded. Humility means to come from the earth. You know, we might be hearing from the book of Genesis right now how we were made from the stuff of the earth. The fourth point is restlessness. We touched on the shared restlessness of the heart of humanity and creation, and how it kind of sets us out onto a journey, right? Where we want to get to a particular point, but we never quite arrive. It's more about being on the way together. And then the last point is pace making. Maybe when people saw this in English, they thought it was a typo where it was peacemaking, but it's actually pace making. How does Augustine say we are to keep pace with each other on our journey? Augustine, in Sermon 52, let us leave a little room for reflection, room too for silence. Enter into yourself. Leave behind all noise and confusion. Look within yourself and see whether there be some hidden place in your consciousness where you can be free of noise and argument, where you need not be carrying on your disputes and planning to have your own stubborn way. Hear the word in quietness that you may understand it. What is the experience of silence like for you? Let's just take 2 moments, 2 minutes together in shared silence and use this quote as a way to enter into interiority, to look within ourselves, to be free of noise and argument, and to hear God speak to us in quietness. So let's just take 2 minutes. Okay. That call to shared silence. It's interesting, when I taught at Villanova, I introduced the practice of silence at the beginning of class. I didn't do it the first day because I would have completely freaked the students out. They already were a little perturbed when I walked in, and they're like, "Oh gosh, now we have a priest in our mandated theology class. What's this going to be like?" So I waited a week or so before I started to introduce the practice of silence, and with just 30 seconds. And I would build them throughout the semester to have like 6 to 10 minutes of silence together at the beginning of class. And it was interesting, at the beginning of the semester, they really, really struggled with it. And they felt like a minute took 20 minutes. And they're like, when is this going to be over? And they had all sorts of things going on in their heads, and they were uncomfortable. They couldn't sit still. People were coughing, sneezing, doing anything they could to distract themselves. But by the end of the semester, they said that was one of the best things from the class. And of course, I joked and said, "Oh, because you didn't have to listen to me. That's probably why it was good." But they said, no, there was something about the invitation in a safe space to be quiet together, where it wasn't an awkward silence, where people didn't know what to say to another person, but that together people were being invited to share in quiet and to be together in silence. I wonder if in that experience it was a true Ostia moment for them, like it was for Monica and Augustine, where they had this sense that we were in it together and that they were made, and that deep down they had the same desires, the same longings, despite any disputes that they may have been having with each other or disagreements. But there was something very freeing about being invited to be quiet together. Our world needs to be invited to have an interior life in a safe way, and not where voices are no longer heard, but where we can get to the deep voice that's begging to be spoken deep within us. And Augustine says that when we begin to enter in, when we begin to navigate the interior life, our minds and our hearts, we start to go into self-knowledge. And for those that know Carmelite spirituality and are drawn to Teresa of Avila, Teresa of Avila does a lot about, in the interior castle. She talks about the interiority and what it's like to start to go within, and you start to see all sorts of things that you're like, how did that get in there? How did those snakes and reptiles and creepy crawly things get in? I don't like this. I don't want this here, right? There's stuff when we go inside of ourselves that we may discover about ourselves that we've been holding on to, that we just go, I don't like it. And Augustine says that's the first step to self-knowledge. He says, let me know myself. Let me know you. That is my prayer. He knew deep down that when he went inside of himself, that's where he discovered God's loving, real presence. In various ways throughout the confessions, he says, you were within me, but I was outside of myself. Augustine knew that the antidote was to go within and to get in touch with what was poking his heart, with who was poking his heart. And then he says this, let me know you, O you who know me. Then I shall know, even as I am known. A wonderful realization on his part that when we go inside of ourselves and start to discover more of who we discover who we are because who God is, who made us, and that God loves each of us, as he says in his confessions, as if there were only one of us, particularly. And then we are to take that out into the world and see that God loves every person just as he loves me, just as he loves you. And so for Augustine, self-knowledge leads to knowledge of God, which then brings us out to love others, to the point where Augustine says there is no stranger to any of us, no matter who we are or where we're from, because we're all made in God's image and likeness, right? And isn't the world struggling with that right now? We want to other others. We want to draw a line between us and them. And Augustine says there's no line. If we all just go within and fall silent together, it'll lead us to praise. In one of his famous sermons, Sermon 169, he brings us further. And this is where we talk about humility coupled with a sense of journey. Forge ahead, my brothers and sisters. Always examine yourselves without self-deception, without flattery, without buttering yourselves up. After all, there's nobody inside you before whom you need to feel ashamed or whom you need to impress. There is someone there, but one who is pleased with humility. Let that one test you, and you too test yourself. Always be dissatisfied with what you are if you want to arrive at what you are not yet. Because wherever you are satisfied with yourself, there you have stuck. Always keep on walking. Always forge ahead. Again, the gift of interiority and self-knowledge, grounded in true humility of who we really are in God, leads us outward. And we desire so much to get to a particular point in life. And Augustine says, on this side of the kingdom of God, it's not going to happen. There's always going to be something where we're just not there yet. But he says, don't stop. Keep at it. Oftentimes in our communal discernment, in our shared life together, we want to get to a particular point and we think, if we get here, this will save us. Or this particular decision will then, we'll finally have arrived. And that's not just true about religious life. I think it's just true about life in general, right? Sometimes, people live for the weekend. If I can just get to Friday, it'll all be good. Augustine says it's something that's in us that's always going to be dissatisfied, but not to do this without hope and to keep at the journey together and to trust one another on that journey. But it can be exhausting. Traveling, if you've ever been on a pilgrimage, right? It can be pretty exhausting. I'm sure some of you have already done this. I have not done it yet, but the Camino, right, can be pretty exhausting. And Augustine says this, well, when you're exhausted, lean on each other. He says it's reported of deer that when they either wander in the herds or when they are swimming to reach some other parts of the earth, they support the burdens of their heads on each other in such a manner as that one takes the lead and others follow, resting their heads upon him, as again others who follow do upon them, and others in succession to the very end of the herd. But the one who took the lead in bearing the burden of their heads, when tired, returns to the rear and rests himself after his fatigue by supporting his head just as the others did, by thus supporting what is burdensome. Each in turn, they both accomplish their journey and do not abandon each other. that call first to not go at it alone. That it's not just about one person's journey, it's all of our journey together. And to not abandon each other. That the more we do things together, the lighter the load, the lighter the burden. Do not be afraid to take the lead, and do not be afraid to ask for help and to lean on each other. Isn't this a wonderful invitation into our community life? How do we lean on each other, no matter where we are on the journey? And lastly, pacemaking. Let those who are quicker than others in understand and reflect that they're walking along the road together with those who are slower. When one is faster than a companion, it's the power of the faster to allow the slower to catch up, not vice versa. If the faster walks with all possible speed, the slower will not succeed in the following. The faster must slow the pace so as not to abandon the slower companion. How do we keep pace with each other? How do we notice each other's pace? How might we say, hey, you're going too fast ahead of us? Or how might we say that there's someone behind us, hey, do you need some help? Or let me slow down, let me stop a bit. Let's catch our breath together. That concern for a community, that concern not to abandon each other. One insight I think that we're seeing into Leo's leadership is that he very much thinks this way, and also with the way the deer work when they cross the river. He doesn't want to abandon anybody. He doesn't want anyone to feel left out. You can see that in how he's expressing things. It doesn't mean he doesn't draw the line, as we heard last week in various points with the press and his call for peace, his continual call for peace. But he wants people to catch up to the real needs and hurts of a. And we're going to see him in the church, particularly, try to reach out to various corners, right? And to bring them all into the center. And it can be frustrating for all people, no matter where we may be in our own journey. But it's going to be something that's of definitely mind and heart for Leo in his leadership. How do we all get in pace with each other along the way? Augustine says this, and this is particularly about religious life. This is an exposition that he wrote about community life. And he calls our community life together a safe harbor. Think about that, a safe harbor. He says, even a harbor has an entrance somewhere. If a harbor had no entrance on any side, then no ship could enter it. So it must of necessity lie open on one side. Yet sometimes the wind rushes in from that open side, and even where there are no rocks, the ships are dashed against each other and are shattered. Then where can that security be found, if not in a harbor? And yet we must confess, we must grant that those in the harbor are still much more fortunate than those on the open sea. Let them love one another. In port, be bound to each other by good. Let them not be dashed against each other, and let impartial equality and constant love be preserved there. And if by chance the wind rushes in from the open side, let there be careful piloting. And you want to say to Augustine, if by chance the wind rushes in, the wind does rush in, right? We bring all of our stuff into our shared life together, and we bump into each other at times. That's the great insight that he says, like the boats are going to bump into each other, but let's do so with a care for, with charity and the common good. And let's have some careful piloting, right? But there are going to be times, even in our wonderful, healthy attempts in shared discernment, and I'll give some stories, we're going to bump into each other at times. And so it might require an apology. It might require, oh, let me help fix that, right? So what's it like in community, in our gatherings, in our chapters, when we bump into each other? And oftentimes, it's around this word truth. I love in the Italian, when I'm learning about Italian, in the English translation of the Gospels, the what's referred to as the authentic Jesus sayings and that are peppered throughout the Gospels. Um, in English, he says, "Amen, amen, I say to you." But in Italian, it's in verita, in truth. And it's that question, what is truth? And oftentimes, it's what is true, the sprinkling versus the raining, where we bump into each other in our life together. And this was what Augustine says about truth. Let us equally give our attention with peaceful minds to truth, which is either neither yours nor not mine, but set before us for our contemplation. Again, let's equally give our attention with peaceful minds to the nature of the truth, which is neither yours nor mine, but set before both of us for our contemplation. So the truth is among us. The truth is within us. And it's more present when we share together, sometimes in silence and other times in dialogue. And it's begging for us to attempt to speak to it and with it. So let's just take 3 minutes to just sit in silence with this question, and it's in the 4 languages. You come to know what is true about yourself, about community, about God. How have you come to know what is true about yourself, about community, about God? Okay. What it's like when we discover truth, right? About ourselves, about others, about who God is, and how we come to that. Just a few more points before we get to the examples. And oh, I'm sorry. I think, John Luca, I think you were going to do something with regard to the breakout sessions.
So we can invite people to two things. One is to, if people had some reflections on the questions you gave us, Kevin, because
Sure.
we could put that on there. But we want to make sure we ask you if you would just check one of the groups, English, French, Italian, Spanish, or no group, so that we can at least have this set up. It'll still take another 15 minutes before we get into groups, but this will help us immensely. If you could just click on one of those languages, English, Francais, Italiano, Espanol, no group. Because once we hit a certain percentage, we'll proceed. But if you could do that, it just helps us to know to set up the groups for the end of Kevin's presentation and then the reflection questions and the handouts that we'll give you then. So thank you for taking a moment right now. And if people want to, you can certainly put in some of your own thoughts on what you've heard thus far and what that means in light of truth for you. We'll just take a couple minutes here. So if you just click the language and then click the word on the lower right-hand corner that says submit. So we need you to do both of those. So to click, and then it will say, thank you for submitting your poll. So both click and submit. So again, thank you. Please click on one of the options, English, French, Italian, Spanish, or no group, and then click submit. And if none of those are possible for you because you're using a phone perhaps, and you would like to be in a group, if you put that in the chat, just your language. But we need your name, we need something with it. So thank you for helping us with this. We need a few more people, please fill this in. All right, so we're gonna stop the poll now, and I'm gonna ask Kevin to continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the comments so far about what you've been hearing. And I'm struck with particularly just, what these moments that UISG has offered us around charism and synodality, how it's helping us to enter and learn from each other, right? And expand, widen our vision, and also help us to go deeper together in our own charisms. And what a gift. And I thank you again for giving me the opportunity to share the charism of the Augustinians, and this has really been helpful to me to kind of attempt to put words to it, to really what pokes my heart, right? And we all know that it's difficult stuff. And one of the things regarding communal discernment is Augustine would say you need good leadership, right? And what is that? What does that look like? So go back to the slides. You will have seen this or heard this part of it on May 8th last year when Leo came out to the loggia for the first time. And he took a line from this particular sermon and it was Augustine reflecting on his time as a bishop. And he says this, from the moment this burden was placed on my shoulders, anxiety about the honor shown me has always indeed been haunting me. So again, all of you leaders that are out in the room, you especially the generals out there, the presidents of the communities, you know this burden, I think, that Augustine is talking about, where I am terrified by what I am for you. I am given comfort by what I am with you. For you, I am a bishop, or we can insert whatever leadership role that we have. With you, first is the name of an office undertaken, the second, a name of a grace. The first means danger, the second, salvation. Finally, as if in the open sea, I am being tossed about by the stormy activity involved in that one, but as I recall by whose blood I've been redeemed, I enter a safe harbor in the tranquil recollection of this one. And thus, while toiling away at my own proper office, I take my rest in the marvelous benefit conferred on all of us in common. That wonderful for and with distinction and contribution to leadership, to be for, but most importantly and fundamentally, in our very foundation, we are with no matter what our role is. And good leadership has to start by knowing whom you serve, right? In leadership, but that you're part of the group, right? And that we all need each other and have to take turns in sharing the burden, right? And again, we see this image of the sea from Augustine. Hippo, or an Annaba is a port city onto the Mediterranean. So I think he probably saw a lot of storms out there, and so he's like, "Oh gosh, thank God for the safe harbor. Thank God for the safe harbor of community." But it can get chaotic at times. Now, this is where the communal discernment I can begin to share some two actual experiences of this and what it looks like and feels like in the Augustinian tradition. So, as Maria had shared, for the past 5 years before coming to Rome, I was asked to serve as vice president for mission and ministry. And it was my first real leadership role. I learned as I went. And I think maybe in some ways, no matter how much somebody is prepared, you really don't know what it's going to look and feel like until you actually get in it, get in the work and get down and put roll your. There's some real reluctance and resistance in that going, oh gosh, it was better when I didn't do this. But mission ministry was going through a time of discernment at Villanova. The school had been growing; it had been getting a lot of attention, and this is before Leo put the spotlight on us. And so we were asked as the mission office, which included, our pastoral outreach, our intentional programming on Catholic identity, but also multi-faith traditions, what the Augustinian Charism had to do for the university. We were asked to examine ourselves as a staff. It's a very large staff, 35 people, and to really start to enter into the process. And a lot of these quotes that I shared with you these past 2 days, I used with the leadership team to kind of help do some formation for the staff. And it was over a series of a couple of years where we had, large staff gatherings monthly around people's hearts, right? And to really kind of enter into this, but also at the same time to enter into silence. And what was a gift about all of this is 2022 happened with Pope Francis introducing synodality, because that really helped tease out this imagination, this reimagination, that wonderful method of conversations in the spirit, where it was a more disciplined approach, right? And we've shared that in different forms, where we sat in smaller and listened to each other, right? And we all spoke. We had particular time limits so that not one voice was dominating. And at the very beginning, it was really hard. People were like, do we have to keep doing this? And even myself, I was kind of like, do we have to keep doing this? But I thought, well, we got to stick with it. But those conversations in the spirit really helped move us to start to look at some restructuring. It wasn't easy, and we bumped into each other. Even myself as a leader, as I've reflected on my 5 years in that role, I didn't always listen well, right? So I had to go within. I had to get feedback, right? And then, of course, I get plucked from that role into now this role for the order. And the group at Villanova is still in this process, but they're coming to the point of some really good, healthy decision making based on this Augustinian input that really helped them. The second is about community life. Us as religious, um, we've been using the synodal method since it was introduced by Francis for the life of the church in our gatherings. We, as a province, I'm part of the East Coast province at Villanova, called the Villanova Province in the United States, and we always have a weekly gathering in June where the whole province comes together. Sometimes it's our time for chapter, other times it's for assembly, other times actually started having synodal conversations with each other, where we brought in outside facilitators, some of our lay collaborators, which was a real gift. And most of whom were women. So it was great to bring women into the space as well, to help just bring a different perspective, a different way in. And they guided us. And again, it was very bumpy at the beginning. It was very bumpy. But again, it's now part of how we gather as a province, to the point now, last summer, this methodology was introduced to our other two provinces in the US, where we gathered in convocation together. And we're now in this process of discernment right now in our what's called our Federation of the Three Provinces, working more closely together, which could possibly lead to unification. Unification is a very scary word right now for our three provinces in the US. We're like, no, 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 no. We like our own identity, right? And yet, if you remember correctly, in our very foundation as Augustinians, it was the call to become one. And so we're using that unioning experience in our DNA from the very beginning to help us to really. And so what emerged from our gathering last summer, we've now broken up into smaller groups within our provinces to start to dig deeper into what might be getting in the way. What's bubbling up in our individual hearts, but also in our provincial hearts, right? And we're bumping right now into each other, but it's actually a healthy bump because we actually do, quote, feel the love. We know that we're somehow in this together and that we're being asked. But I wish I could, maybe I'll give you like stay tuned to be continued about what that might look like. But with that, we have to acknowledge past hurts, right? There's some various things where we've gotten in each other's way. We have to acknowledge the past hurts in order to move forward. And I'm sure that you all have experienced yourself in your own communities when you've looked at whether particular provinces unite or not. But we're using the spirit of Augustine and the rule to kind of help us get through that together. And now just to close, and then we'll move into our breakout sessions. I want to share one final thought. Where did it go? Again. Oop. Okay. Where did my share screen go? Okay. So a couple of years ago, I was on retreat at a Jesuit retreat house in Gloucester, Massachusetts, called Eastern Point. It's a wonderful, wonderful spot. And it's right there on the water. And I always look for retreat houses that have water nearby. There's something about the water. Maybe it's baptismal, maybe it's the call, the Sea of Galilee, all that stuff that's kind of all rolled into one. But I was struggling at one point in the retreat. That can so often happen. It was an 8-day silent retreat, and I had a wonderful Jesuit spiritual director, and he had given me the passage of the call of the disciples at the Sea of Galilee. So I said, all right, fine. So I went out and I would pray most intentionally in the evenings. And I sat on that rock that's right there. And I came across and got stuck on the passage when Jesus calls the sons of Zebedee, James and John, and they're there mending their nets. And it was in that moment where I said, God, I feel like I'm tangled in the net right now, right? And I just feel stuck. And I was kind of having this real struggle with God and with this net, and I was feeling all chaos. And I turned around and saw the picture on the left. And yes, it's a net and it's all tangled up. And I quickly took the picture. I was like, I had no words. So the next day when I went in for my session with the spiritual director, I just showed him the phone. I said, this happened in my prayer experience. And he just went, oh my gosh, I have nothing to say. And I said, neither. Right? There are times where we can get tangled up. And Jesus wants us to be freed from that which tangles us. And so one more video. I promise this is not about toddlers this time, although maybe you enjoy that. There's one more video, and it's Nemo. And it's the very end of the movie. Now, this movie, Nemo, is about a clownfish, a little clownfish who gets lost. And his father, Marlin, is looking for him. And he finally finds him, and he gets caught up in this net with other fish. So let's just see what happens.
Nemo? Nemo?
Dad! Nemo's alive!
Dory? Nemo!
Dad!
Nemo! I'm coming, Nemo!
Dad!
Nemo! Oh, thank goodness. It's all right, son. It's gonna be okay.
Turn around! You're going the wrong way!
Look out!
Dory!
Come on!
am not gonna...
There's no time! It's the only way we can save Dory! I can do this!
You're right. I know you can.
Lucky Finn!
Now go! Hurry!
Tell all the fish to swim now!
Well, you heard my son? Come on!
Dory, you have to tell everybody to
Swim down together! Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Swim down!
Everybody swim down! Come on, you have to swim down! Swim down, okay?
Down! Swim down! Swim down! Swim down! Don't give up! Keep swimming! Just keep swimming! That's it!
It's working!
Just keep swimming! Keep swimming!
Come on, Dad!
You're doing great, son!
That's my dad!
Come on, let's get to the bottom! Keep swimming!
Keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
Almost there! Keep swimming! Dory!
So when we get tangled up in the nets, and it's not if we get tangled up in a net, because we will, what we have to do is swim down together. When we go deeper together and swim in one direction, we can then break free from that which tangles us up. And that can be true for life in general, in terms of our own community life, our own discernment. And we may need to coach each other along to keep swimming and to keep swimming down. So when we're in those conversations with each other and we're discerning together, where we ask each other to stop, look, and listen, to listen, Linda, right? As we started yesterday, I was struck that the word Linda in Espanol means pretty, means beautiful one. That if we have that approach in our own conversations, in our own encounters, in our own dialogues, that the one whom we are encountering is beautiful and loved by God. And that we ourselves are also Linda and Lindo, loved by God. And if we have that as our starting point and can swim down together and stop, look, and listen, we can actually move closer and closer into that oneness that God calls us to. A oneness that Augustine knew deep down was the call of all humanity. So with that, I believe we're going to go into breakout sessions. You'll have this on your handout for your mutual sharing of goods. These are the questions, but again, feel free to just speak whatever might be on your heart and mind. What is getting your attention and inviting you to stop, look, and listen? What pokes your heart? What questions might be emerging?
Okay. So Kevin, if you could leave those questions still on for the moment.
Sure.
Sister Therese is going to post here on the chat the handout with these questions in 4 languages. And so thank you, grazie mille, Therese. And we're going to allow for a few minutes of quiet so both people can open this up, the handout, and look at it from their different languages, and that we can kind of give people a little bit of quiet before we move to the groups. But what you've given us is the question for everyone, so you can even hear it. What is getting your attention and inviting you to stop, look, and listen? And then what pokes your heart? And what questions you have that are emerging? So we will allow for a little bit of silence right now, a few minutes. I'm trying to see if they've shown up yet. They will be showing up, the questions, but everyone can at least take a moment with this right now. And thank you, Kevin. We are all cheering on Nemo, and more than that, one another.
That's right.
And my sisters and brothers, you can see that the chat has the handouts. EN would be in English, ES is Espanol, FR French, and IT Italiano. So just click on the one that makes sense for you. But these are the questions for reflection, and we'll take a few minutes of just quiet. Kevin, would you like to begin with any reflections
Sure.
on what you're seeing here? Thank you.
Yeah, well, again, I'm delighted that the conversations were so rich. I thought that they would be, no matter what questions were out there, just because we all are just so wonderful in terms of the way we show up to really just kind of listen to each other and to accompany each other. Um, yeah, I've seen some wonderful things there about, that the call to interiority, the call to kind of keep pace with each other, which is a really difficult one. Maria and I had a good conversation during the break ourselves about what is that like? How does that feel? And, is there ever a time, and it's reflected a little bit in one of the comments on the chat. Well, what happens if someone's just really slowing us down? Or if someone doesn't show up, right? What happens there? And certainly, in the way Augustinians tend to work, and it's also just a human thing too. Um, we really have as one of our primary concerns and values is to really try to be inclusive and to bring people along, right? And then slow us down, even if we're making some strides, or it might take us a little bit longer to get there. And as I was sharing that, Maria said, that sounds like what the Dominicans shared at their charism. And, afterwards, I'm thinking, well, I wonder if it's some of it's the mendicant stuff, right, that's being teased out. And I also maybe wonder if because it's the rule of Augustine that's kind of that frames their way of life as well, that relationality and being on the journey together. Um, and with that, the reality is there a time though where we just got to move and make a move? One or two or a few individuals really resisting it? And the answer is yes. And it could be hard, it could be hurtful. Um, Augustine himself did not experience. I always say that if he experienced the community life that he proposes in the rule, he probably wouldn't have had to write the rule. Right? Because it presents the ideal. We have a great document from I think it's the early 90s. It was not completely new when I was a novice, but it was passed on to us. And it says community, it's an Augustinian document, community where the ideal meets the real. And that there are going to be times that when we bump into each other, some people are going to be left behind. And what is that like? And I think, sometimes we just have to, whether it's on the local level or the provincial level, there's times that decisions just need to be made. And that's where good leadership can coach people along to make the decision, and also give the brother the space that he may need, because that's the other piece um, in the rule is about kind of respecting the individual needs at times, right? Each according to need, as he says twice in the rule. Um, but to really invite that brother into conversation. It's also reflective in my experience of, our strengthening of relationships in the U.S. With our three provinces. Again, there's been some hurts and stuff from over the years, most of which we just kind of inherited. Most of the people in the room weren't there when the hurts happened, but how often stories can get perpetuated. Um, but I think that, part of, what's of our time coming together in our federation and really discerning unification, we know that it's a possibility down the road, but we're not going to push it, at least just yet, because we want people to buy into it, right? And to really be able to say, no, this really is important, and we don't want to force people into it. So we have to just give it some more time, more discernment. So we're going to keep strengthening our relationships in the federation.
Perfect. I'm going to invite one of the people who had her hand up. It looks like Elizabeth Mooney, who has a question. So if you would unmute yourself, we can invite your comment or question, please.
I have valued, thank you, the input now for this input, extremely, really happy. But my concern for us of late, there has been a very strong movement among us, even though we have the Augustinian rule, to say contemplative prayer. Everyone should be praying contemplatively. And that has been interpreted, we all pray on our own.
Mhm.
Community prayer, say, oh, you want to hold us back, you don't want to move. People say you do that. I feel it has really weakened community.
Yes, yes.
And community meetings have fallen by the wayside.
Mm.
Everybody has full of good intentions, but I do feel it has weakened our whole spirituality as a congregation.
Mm.
And it's very difficult, I think, now to bring it back. It does worry me, because for me, St. Augustine's main field of community built on a good prayer life. And it's community prayer, I think.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, there's space, right, for both the personal, which is needed, your personal, private. So the importance of that, the common prayer life of what we hold in common, and I think there's a way, I think, there can be shared contemplation, right? So in addition to the liturgy of the hours, for instance, to the divine office, there can be moments that are embedded for more intentional silence together, so moments to then, share the fruits of that silence. Because Augustine, I think he would push us as well to not, it's not meant to just be kept between me and God, right? It's really about sharing it with the community, right? Because it's the search for God together. So that would be something to kind of, maybe encourage and invite people into, because contemplation is important. Contemplative prayer is definitely important. And certainly our one.
Many questions from me, like we say our constitution and all, we say the prayer of the church and we come together for a prayer. We sort of seem to have gone a little bit too individualistic, which I
Mhm.
worry a bit about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And maybe that might be an interesting thing too is, is there room, is there space to invite the various members into to share their particular prayer experiences and invite other people, hey, let's try this out together. Because I think the value would be to do it together, right? Um, because the individual matters, but also the community matters as well. So it's trying to strike that balance. Thank you for sharing that, Elizabeth.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I wonder too, Kevin, because we talked about this a little while people in our little small group, was when, and you bring it up in some ways when you spoke of the Dominicans too, that when you look at communal discernment, you start with what's the greatest value. And one of the greatest values is community. And so how do you both keep the community together and also move it? There was a wonderful, he's Ignatian, Howard Gray at one point used the image of being on the train platform. And you work as hard as you can to get everyone on the train, on the platform. But at some point, you got to move it. And there may be some left on the platform. So that's always the push-pull. But if you were to say, for example, on an important decision, a discernment that your community had to make at some point in the last 50 years, let's say, and kind of like the method, if you were explaining to a novice, how did you discern that? Or if you had an Augustinian parish and the
Mhm.
people were saying, we're not a Jesuit parish, we're not Franciscans, we're Augustinians, but we will have to, as a parish team, discern ministry options that are calling us, or look at the size of our school or something. How would you, what would be things? Yes, it's about relationship and how you go about it. But if you were to say, they're asking, how might we,
Yeah.
can you think of some examples of ways you've done it too?
Sure, sure. So one example that I can think of it had to be about 15 years ago. It was one of our apostolates, and we made the decision to withdraw from this one high school that most of our members had gone to, including myself. And it had, when we were our highest as a province, which was, I think, probably in the early 80s, we had about 400 members in the province. And 1/3 of the province membership in our height had graduated from this high school. So it just had a huge impact. But we made the painful decision to withdraw. And how we did that, there were some issues. It wasn't one of our owned schools. It was a school that we had staffed from the beginning. But what had happened was there were issues that were arising with the particular diocese in which the school was located. It was paining a lot of the friars that were there on staff, and they were in conversation with the provincial about it. So the provincial and the council, had several conversations with them, and it was really affecting their community life. And when something starts to affect our life in common, we go, okay, wait a minute, we got to look at this. Because if it's affecting those relationships, right? What I thought was really kind of powerful, and I was at that point, it was 15 years ago. Um, the decision didn't stop there. It was then brought, believe it or not, and this was before synodality became like in vogue, right? But it was brought to our yearly assembly. It actually wasn't a chapter. It was just the 1 week that we have set aside each year. And the provincial and the council brought this concern to the community, to the whole province gathered, and shared about the experiences, had told that local community, that he was going to be sharing some of this without like getting in like to the nitty-gritty and naming names. But it allowed all of the friars to really listen to the pains of one local community. And it then helped inform the provincial and the council to make the decision. So I think that was a deeply Augustinian way to a beloved apostolate, right? And it was the right decision at the right time. But it was a way of bringing people in so that it wasn't one of those things where the friars like, how the heck did they make that decision, right? People felt like they were part of it. So when we go to make a big decision, we really want to include people without violating, privacy and that sort of stuff when things need to happen. But there's always going to be a desire for us to bring people so that it's not just a notice that goes to this parish sort of thing. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and I invite people to keep writing because we have some wonderful questions there. So it seems that participation is so key
Yeah.
and really knowing your history and story. And then you brought up community as one of the areas. And then ultimately, would it be your provincial team that would have made that
That's right.
ultimate
Exactly.
discernment? But so part of this is to make sure that people have participatory capacities and that it's really heard.
That's right.
Not just I'm consulting you, but really I'm listening to you, and that's one of the gifts of community and one of the responsibilities is
Yeah,
to
that's right.
go back and forth in there. So wonderful, wonderful. Thank
There
you.
was there was one moment in that gathering where the provincial, it was really paying attention to the spirit, just hadn't asked every friar that had graduated from the school to please stand. And it was just like, whoa, it was a very emotional moment, and it was a true acknowledgement and reverence for what the charism did to those graduates, right? It was really powerful. Yeah.
Perfect. Other thoughts? And in here we're looking a little to the questions, the interiority. Sister Marcella has a question.
Great.
Please, per favore, unmute yourself, please. Gianluca, can you help?
Oh, there she is.
S-
Ahora sí, gracias.
Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Father Kevin, for the work during these 2 days, for the sharing during these 2 days. Truly, more than a question, it's just to say thank you to thank you and to thank you, ISG, for everything they offer, because it's made me work these 2 days in creating a lot of hope. I am part of the general government. It's about seeing that all things do not necessarily have a solution as we would want. As I listening to you helped me understand that the issues that arise, for example, that picture you showed about the net, sometimes that is how we live. There are situations, and part of the history of each of our congregation is like that. And at present, we may not have an exact or marvelous solution. That gave me a lot. It helped me a lot when you say, well, I went to my spiritual director and I asked him, and he didn't even have the solution. That helped me personally to say, to realize how many things as government do not have a solution, or we don't have a solution. And I myself do not find this, but I but it's about being a human being. It's helped me. And as we shared in the group, we said that what you have shared, those images, leave us with a lot. Sometimes they seemed like simple things. For example, the movie, who would have thought? It left us with a great message when when you gave us that moment of silence. It was extremely enriching for me as a Dominican. Yes, we do have that space of silence. We shared in the group that we know, and we are in this service, and we say that everything starts from an inner life. But sometimes the work is so hard that we say, and what about prayer? No, I mean, it was important when you said that the group of students, how enriching it was. And I related to moments that were experienced in the community when those moments, those prayers were very special and enriching. And even though the time we spent with you was brief, it was very valuable. So I just want to say thank you, because it's been an experience that gave me very concrete things to experience and to face the challenges that we have to experience in the congregation and respond through my service. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Marcella, for sharing really what poked your heart from these days. That's now poking my heart, and I'm grateful to hear that. And I'm reminded, there was a comment, and I was thinking about this too as you were speaking about the Esperanza story, right? She's always there in the midst when we're all tangled up, when we're in the context, oh yeah, the conflict or the chaos, right? Esperanza is trying to get our attention. That hope is still somehow there, right? And I think it's how do we hold that together, that when we know that we're struggling and then we can't find a solution, right? Our hope is in the cross, right? In these Easter days. And, we have to really just trust that somehow that presence is there in it with us. It doesn't take away the toughness of the situation, right? But we have to be people with hope, right? So thank you for that.
Yeah, and that's a powerful way, maybe, as we look at even concluding. It's looking at this and saying, what we learned from our different charisms is a way of being, a way of pondering, a way of praying, and it's all about the formation of who we are and are becoming, so that when these decisions are to be made and discernment is to be done, you have a sense of who is the community in our midst and how might we, and that there's not always in ways one particular way. But if you're Augustinian, what will be those leanings? What will be those lenses? And you gave us a sense of that kind of silence, that way of being in relationship, that way of harbor and holding one another in this, and that being together is so key. But also that that quote, and you gave us the wider sense of the quote, because we'll often hear, I am with you as a bishop and I'm with you as a Christian. I serve you in this way, but you gave the wideness of it. And so it's how we are together, as our sister Marcella said. It's the way of being, and we're not dealing with easy questions necessarily, or things that can just be said, put this formula in and now we figured it out. But it is a way of journeying, and Pope Leo keeps saying to us, dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. It's key for peace. It's key for so much. Now, we're going to do one last, and my sister Isaiah Marie, we're going to have to ask you to just offer a brief comment because we're just about at the end of our time, and I know our interpreters are going to leave us as well. But if you wanted to add a comment briefly or question, that'd be great. Please, prego. Did you want to speak? Sister Isaiah Marie, or no?
I had a question, but because we reached it, my connection is not very stable. I'm not sure if you answered the question that I raised in the chat. It was how self-knowledge comes into discernment. More I know God, more I know myself, but I wanted to see how it touches in terms of discernment. When I think of discernment, I think that I come with what I am, with who I am, with my psychology, with my personality, and my history. But I would like to know more about how it's all involved with the discernment, but maybe it's too late to get into that right now.
But Kevin, if you can answer that important question in 2 minutes or less, at least to give us a start.
I was going to make a joke and say that's day 3 of the workshop, but there is no day 3. No, I think that's a great insight and question. You know, self-knowledge is key. And for Augustine, but also Catherine of Siena, who picks it up, Teresa of Avila, who picks it up, and they both deepen it, right? You know, you would start with self-knowledge, move into the experience of God dwelling within, and then go outside, right? So, and it's a continual circular sort of relationship, this ebb and flow. So we may have a sense of ourselves and our own discernment, but we may need somebody else, just as in that Finding Nemo quote video, to coach us to say, no, I also see these gifts in you. And so that information, right, we take them inside into our own interior life, see where they land, how it pokes my heart. And that can inform and form us in our response. Now, certainly we all do this in various ways and expressions, but I think it's it's usually when like you're being sent into a new ministry, or you're being asked to consider doing this for the sake of the order, right? So you have to kind of see where it sits when it hits you, right? Based on your own experiences. And then obviously you bring it to spiritual direction, people who know you well, and you test it out with others. Because Augustine would also say one of the dangers, if we just stick to the self-knowledge stuff, and Teresa of Avila would say this, and she does it more deliberately, we have to be very careful about self-deception. So our self-knowledge isn't the actual 100% picture of who we are, right? So we have to be able to bring it out to trusted individuals who can give us feedback and not just affirm us, but also tell us, oh no, you want to do this, you want to do this, you want to challenge us. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I'm grateful for your question.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think that's just a great start. There you go. You've got the chat in there. But I want to, because there's always more. There's always more. And who knows, there may be a day 3 at another point. But for now, what we really have to do is to say to people, we're grateful that you are with us. And certainly, Kevin, thank you for being with us and opening a way of being, a way that utilizes and receives the charism we've been given and says, how do we discern? How do we move? So I'm grateful to you. You know, we are all praying for Pope Leo, and his trip to Africa is a very powerful space right now in our world. And so for all of you, I want to thank you for being with us. The more we utilize our charism for discernment, and the more we can name how it is that we discern, the more we are also able to offer something to the wider church. And that's what Synodality in the church, Pope Francis and Pope Leo are asking. Please use all the gifts that religious life are, that our lives, and for all of you living any particular charism, bring it out to the world. Bring it out to a world that's desperate for a way that I can engage instead of violate others. And so thank you. Thank you for being part of this. We will have a Benedictine one is on the schedule to come next. We also I just want to tell you, we will be doing again every quarter training. Kevin mentioned Conversation in the Spirit, and we do quarterly trainings. The next one is going to be open for all religious and also all of your partners in mission. So it's men, women, everyone. Pope Francis and Leo are asking everyone in the church to learn Conversation in the Spirit. And so again, with 4 languages, we will make that available. It's just a 2-hour training. 2 of us will be offering it and give you experience of it. So you're not just learning it, but you're actually have a chance to utilize it. And so I just, definitely want to invite you. I'm just putting on this. The next one we will do, training, will be on May 19 at 2 p.m. until 4 p.m. So Rome time, May 19, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Rome time. So I'm just putting this, Roma. So you are welcome you need to register. It will not be recorded because the importance is that you learn it and practice it. So we've been doing this for the last almost 2 years, and people have found it very helpful. So please tell your communities, your colleagues. It's open to everyone. And Sister Laurence Louvier and I will both be coordinating this one. But I want to thank our wonderful interpreters. I want to thank Gianluca. I want to thank Therese. Thank you for your affirmation of the efforts of UISG. And it's a privilege and a gift. We're walking together as church here. So from all over the world, grazie, hvala lepa, merci beaucoup, obrigado, obrigada, grazie, muchísimo gracias, and have a wonderful evening. Buonasera. Ciao.